one. We're live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on where you are on this happy planet. Welcome to episode 29 of the Moor Insights Strategy Data Center Podcast. I'm Matt Kimball, and I am here with the groovy Will Townsend and Paul Smith-Goodson, two amazing gentlemen who are going to join me we join every couple of weeks for a fun conversation. As I said, it's episode 29. Some interesting facts about the number 29. That seems to be an obsession of mine lately. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a prime number. That's not interesting, but it's the 10th prime number. Don't know if you knew that. And it is the atomic number of copper. A couple of other things. Yeah. 29 states in India. And guess what the orbit year or the orbit cycle of the planet Saturn is?
29,000 years.
29 years. 29,000?
I don't know.
Holy hell. Paul, we got to
I'm not an astronomer, okay?
Oh my gosh. 29 years. Anyway, hey, listen, we're going to talk about a bunch of really cool things, technology focused. Don't take a single thing we say as investment advice or even a hint of investment advice. And we don't want to see you on CNN 2 years from now referencing the 29th episode of the Data Center Podcast for the reason why you lost your life fortune on the stock market. Okay? So with that said, we got a bunch of stuff we're going to talk about. Zscaler, AI, Broadcom, HPE, xAI, Dell, and then finally getting to know us. And that last one's a work in progress. Before we get going, guys, do you want to add anything before we jump in?
No, other than I've been home for nearly 6 or 7 weeks, and I'm headed back on the road, and I'm going to begin my fall travel stretch. I'm headed to London, so I'll be flying across the pond over the weekend, and I'll be there at Connected Britain. So hit my social media feeds on LinkedIn and X if you want to learn more about what I'll be doing. I'll be talking about kind of emerging technologies in the mobile network operator space. So
right on.
Gratuitous plug for me.
So all of you,
and in keeping with the theme, I wish I was 29 again.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yes, forever 29. So all of you, what are we going to call them? Townies? Because it's not a Swiftie. All you townies out there?
Townies, yeah.
If you're trying to find Will, fly to London this weekend and he'll be there. I'm sure your plane's going to be full now. All right, let's jump right in because we got a lot to cover. We're going to talk about Zscaler's strong earnings. And that is, a creative headline from Will finally.
I'm trying really hard, guys. Like keeping up with Paul is tough, right?
Yep.
So I love this term. I'm going to give Daniel Neiman at the Futurum Group some credit, and I shouldn't do that, Daniel. But Daniel used this term in a tweet or an X or whatever a few weeks ago. But it's just what it's it's literally translated as bearish. People that are sort of negative on the market and this whole concern around AI and bubble. So bubble bear. So it's affected Zscaler now. So Zscaler is a company that I have spent time with over the years. I've gotten to know Jay Chaudhry, who's the CEO, and they operate the largest security cloud on the planet. Well, they just recently announced earnings, and by all measures, they were pretty strong. They delivered, beyond what Wall Street's expectations were. 30% sales growth, billings up 27%, deferred revenue 32% and growing. But the stock took a 17% dive on the day that earnings were announced. Oh. And it was based on concerns about forward-looking profitability. Now, this has affected NVIDIA, probably the best example, right? I mean, they continue to have, just stellar earnings, but there's concern on Wall Street with the bubble bears around future growth, how that's going to slow, and what is the practical, use case for all of this really expensive generative AI stuff that NVIDIA is doing with, with their GPU technology and eventually Blackwell. So, I mean, September tends to be a really weird month from an earnings perspective, and how, and it's really weird from how Wall Street typically reacts to earnings. And also, we're entering very closely to a presidential election, and that tends to give Wall Street jitters as well. So, security is my coverage area. I don't know if the two of you guys caught any of this, but so maybe start with you, Matt. Like, are you seeing this in sort of the storage and the compute companies that you're covering as well?
Yeah, it's funny because it's one of my, not to give away one of my topics, but it's a topic I'm going to hit on, and that is in the storage and the server space. There's been some very positive earnings and some very mixed kind of forward-looking statements around guidance.
Right.
And I mean, very strong growth. Yet, mixed earnings, and I think, or mixed forecasts. And I think it does have a lot to do with the upcoming presidential election. And frankly, I think it has to do with kind of economic place we're at as a country. If you remove AI from the equation for a lot of the companies I track, the numbers are less than stellar.
Yeah.
Right. AI has fueled a lot of revenue, not a lot of margin for companies not named NVIDIA, but a lot of revenue. And I think what we're seeing is the flatness in the market that exists outside of that AI bubble.
Yeah.
That's my 2 cents.
Accurate. Very accurate. Paul, what do you think?
Hey, Paul, are you on mute? Oh, Paul's on mute.
You're on mute, buddy.
Hey, Paul, you got to come up there.
Sorry about that, guys.
That's all right.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, what do you think?
You missed my passcode. I just sent both of you for your new checks. That's okay. And Zscaler's incident, it was pretty much driven by the investors didn't like the forward guidance that they got. They thought it was too low, I think.
Right.
And plus, growth rate's going to be slow, and there's they're worried about the timeline of Zscaler's achieving its GAAP profitability. So they're more focused on future prospects rather than what happened, I think.
Right. Yeah. And that's sort of the assessment, I think, when you look at kind of this bubble bear, kind of syndrome that's going on, right?
Yeah. I mean, without a doubt. And to what you said, Paul, investors always care about the future. They don't care about the past. And if those earnings, it's shocking to me, though, and I'll just shut up after this. It's shocking to me that, companies can come in with incredibly strong earnings and give guidance around growth that is still strong, yet doesn't meet the expectations of the street, and be punished for it. It's like, hey, we're only going to grow at 10%, not 12%. Yeah. Really? Okay. But that's why I'm not in finance, and that's why you shouldn't take our advice.
That's right.
Anyway, so moving on, we got another. You set the stage well with the bubble bears there, Will. We're going to go on and talk about how AI can read your tongue. And I don't know whose topic this is. I'm going to guess maybe Paul.
I wonder.
What is this, Paul?
Yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. Not too many people probably think reading your tongue is interesting, but my DNA. The tongue has actually been used for medical diagnosis for thousands of years by Chinese doctors, and the Western doctors kind of finally caught up with the idea that the tongue has a connection to what's going on inside you during the scarlet fever epidemic in the 19th century. There's a group of researchers from University of Southern Australia and one of the Middle Eastern countries developed this little system that can look at your tongue and tell you what's wrong with your body and if you've got any symptoms. It was built on, it was trained on over 5,000 images. It uses about 6 different machine learning algorithms to look at the colors and sort out the features and that type of thing. It's got over a 98% accuracy in detecting, correlating an issue with the tongue and what's going on with your body. It's not a pseudoscience. It's actually been proven. The tongue color and texture is a diagnostic indicator. You might have anemia, or you might have yellow fever, or even cancer. So they developed this system, and it's pretty simple. It's got a webcam, and you sit in front of the webcam and about maybe 10 inches or so away from it. Focus your image in a laptop. It takes a picture of your tongue, and then the machine learning analyzes all of the textures and the features and stuff like that. And it looks like it's going to be something that can eventually be put into like an iPhone. So for people that are in remote locations and everything, I think it'll be a pretty neat little system. One thing I didn't see in the research was that I didn't see any accommodation for ethnic background or age or lifestyle variations. But I don't know if that actually has any effect on the color of the features. But if it does, they can just kind of broaden the training and get more data sets and everything. So I just thought it was really a neat little AI application. It could be easily integrated into a telemedicine platform, and like I say, remote health issues. So somebody in a data center is feeling sick or something, and stick your tongue out and let's see what's going on. So
there are so many jokes in there. I'm gonna avoid all of those.
No pun intended, but I saw you holding your tongue. So.
Let me. And I have to be sure. I have to be careful to make sure these don't come out as I'm asking questions. Let me ask you this though: given the number of ethnicities and different groups of people and so on and so forth, and the sheer number of people on this planet, is 5,000 a representative sample to deliver? I really don't know. Yeah,
compared to LLMs and the big models, that's really a tiny. Really a tiny sample, but there were a lot of studies, like between 2016 and 2021, they had a lot of these little studies going on, looking at the tongue and systems, and the average images that they used were something like from 70 to 500 images. So when you've got a situation like this, you can use a lot of synthetic data too, but you can use smaller data sets to come up with a pretty good answer. So, I thought that too.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It is, yeah.
Man, I wish we could take this one in a different direction, but well, did you have any questions you wanted to ask her?
No, I'm impressed that you can do all that just with a tongue read.
You're pushing the limits there, dude.
I am. I'm trying really hard not to, man, but it's Friday and I'm headed to London, so woohoo!
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, one last question. Is this, I don't know if you mentioned this, was this a project that was done out of the US, Europe, or you mentioned China? Was it?
It was Baghdad University and University of Southern Australia.
Okay. That's fine.
The professor, never mind.
We better move on, man.
All right. One last question.
80% of those 5,000 were used for training, and then The other 20% were used for the testing of the images and diagnosing. It had like 60 different really abnormal cases in there. So, and those came from Iraqi hospitals.
Interesting. I mean, this really is kind of the future of telemedicine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to move on.
Probably a good idea.
Probably a good idea. So go on. Broadcom goes back to the future with VCF9, VMware Cloud Foundation. So this is my topic. Let me give a little setup for this. So, you know, everyone knows that that Broadcom bought, and by the way, I wrote a Forbes piece on this. Everybody knows that Broadcom bought VMware, and they closed the acquisition about a year ago. And there was a lot of noise around licensing and cost increases or cost decreases or what was going to happen. And there was, quite frankly, a lot of negativity around the acquisition. And part of it was you can point a finger at Broadcom because they really didn't do the best job, and they admit it, of kind of communicating all of these changes out to the marketplace. So with that said, while every pundit, every analyst, every press person, every customer was focused on licensing, they missed something that Broadcom said at the beginning of 2024, and that is, we want to make life a lot simpler for IT folks. Remove complexity, which is the enemy of IT. And they talked about reducing the number of SKUs they had from 4,000 or so down to 4. They talked about integrating these solutions, this IP, all in the back end and removing the complexity. So it gave a complete experience for IT and for the business. And nobody really paid attention to that. But what they unveiled at VMware Explorer last week was kind of the beginning of that vision being, coming to fruition, which is VMware Cloud Foundation 9. So they took all of those great technologies that VMware has built and innovated, quite frankly, around virtualization of compute, storage, network, around cloud technologies, around managing containerized environments, and they took it all and they integrated on the back end and built a front end for IT to manage and for users to consume, to deliver a private cloud environment for large enterprise or for enterprise organizations. And you go, private cloud, what the heck, right? Didn't that go away a long time ago?
Yeah.
This isn't your mother's or your father's or your parents' private cloud. This is truly the public cloud coming on-prem. It is a front-end portal for developers, for data scientists, for users to go in and provision or I should say rent out services or use services. It's a single back end for IT to manage this entire environment, and it can reside anywhere. It can reside on in your data center. It can reside in a public cloud. It can reside in a colo. And it's really about rationalizing how IT deploys services and manages those, and again simplifying the whole concept of IT. And it was interesting because Hock Tan, the CEO of Broadcom, in his one-on many with analysts after the keynote, really dug deep into kind of how this happened. He was talking about Broadcom's own struggles, about how they had 9 or 10 different business units that had 9 or 10 different IT silos and environments, and how do you manage that? And he talked about how they looked at the public cloud and the cost and complexity associated with purely consuming the public cloud, how incredibly costly it was and complex it was, and looking at that VMware portfolio to simplify their own IT operations. That's where it was born. And so that's kind of what they drove toward. Now, he also talked about how a lot of companies use public cloud and experience what he called PTSD, public cloud PTSD, which, maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but there is an effort among enterprise IT to bring back at least some apps and data on-prem from cloud because of cost, because of complexity. And he's really trying to help bridge that on-prem presence. He's really trying to simplify that for organizations. I love the story they're telling. The real test, and they'll point to, and in their latest earnings, they point to, the number of VCF licenses sold, and an earmark of, or really a symbol of, or kind of an indicator of their success. But to me, the real indicator of success will be how much of this gets utilized and consumed by IT.
Mm-hmm.
I, as a large enterprise, I don't have a choice. I have to buy VCF if I'm using VMware. So it's really not an indicator of, how much of that portfolio I'm consuming. I can buy all of VCF and just use the virtualization capability. So it's really, the real indicator is going to be how much this gets used and consumed, and how much demand comes back into Broadcom to further innovate on top of this. So I'm going to shut up there because I could go on for hours, but really interesting concept he's driving.
Yeah, I got some thoughts, Matt. I mean, Broadcom did, kind of shot themselves in the foot when, they closed the acquisition. The first thing they did was they blew up the channel program.
Mm-hmm.
And channel partners were scrambling, going, what the hell is going on? And then the concerns around the licensing increases and that sort of thing. Because, Hawk Tan, I mean, he's got a reputation for, finding, an asset and squeezing more, out of, blood out of the turnip, right? And, evaluating whether something's, undervalued. And I think we've talked about that on prior podcasts. So, I mean, this is all great and it's very, very compelling, but it makes you wonder, I mean, can they really recover and really, drive, the sellability of VCF9, given the destruction with what they did? I mean, the confusion, the unnecessary confusion that was created, and maybe chalk that up to this, Broadcom, has been, a very hardware silicon centric company. Yeah, there's been some software there, but the VMware, I mean, that was sort of like, whoa, this is, it's not a 180, but it was certainly an interesting pivot, for Hawk, right? So, I mean, what can they recover from the damage that was created on the front end?
Yeah, here I'm going to give you and I know Paul's going to want to weigh in. I'll give you my 2 second. I say 2 seconds, so that means 20-minute response to what you said before Paul jumps in. And that is, what they did post-acquisition was something that should have been done, but it should have been done with more care. They got rid of the VMware program and tried to bring all of their channel sellers into Prism, which is the larger Broadcom, right? So simplify the management of the channel partners and leverage kind of synergies that might exist between, partners that were selling VMware and Symantec or CA or something else from Broadcom, right? I get that. They didn't do a good job of messaging it, but I get what they were trying to do. Yeah. Likewise, licensing. Look, everybody's moved to per core licensing. Everybody's moved to subscription-based. There's nothing new about what they did, but the timing of it with everything else was not good. And the unrealized gains in cost, overall cost for companies that weren't leveraging VMware appropriately or fully is what the stink was. I don't blame them for the changes they made, but they didn't.
The execution, was just crummy. Right?
Yeah, they didn't do a great job. Can they recover? Look, I think quite frankly, Broadcom cares about, let's call it the top 10,000 customers that they have, right? That's the enterprise customer. And they care about everybody. Let me take that back. But they're really focused on additive value to those large organizations that are consuming their technology. Why? That's where the money is, the revenue is, and that's where the margin is. And that's where the stickiness is, right? Totally get why they're doing it. There's going to be attrition downstream after that. And they're going to go to Nutanix and others. But I think they're, when all the dust is settled, they're going to be fine in that large enterprise space. Interestingly, AT&T just notified, it just went public that AT&T is suing Broadcom over support, a support agreement breach that they claim that Broadcom is invoking. So that should be fun to watch. But otherwise, I think portfolio-wise, it's going to be interesting. Paul, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. What do you think is going to happen to the smaller companies that can't afford I mean, to get all the benefits of VCF, I mean, it's pretty complex and it's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And not all these companies are going to be able to afford it. So
Right.
what do you think is going to happen to them? Are they going to go to Red Hat or Nutanix or?
Yeah, there's a Broadcom has a solution called vSphere Foundation, which is VMware vSphere Foundation, which is kind of like taking the concept of VCF and paring it down for smaller organizations, which I think some customers will go to. But I think, for those more commercial, smaller commercial customers, I think Nutanix is probably going to be the big winner and the big beneficiary of all of that. And Red Hat less so. The challenge Red Hat has, Paul, is they're a good company and they have great technology, but for a lot of these smaller customers, it's about ease of use, ease of deployment, ease of use, ease of management. And Nutanix wins that battle hands down.
Yeah.
In many cases, Red Hat is really just about codifying an open source project and putting support behind it, right? Love them as a company, but not as much innovation on that front. It's more about kind of supporting what's going on from an open source perspective. So I really think Nutanix is going to be the biggest winner in all of that.
Yeah, Broadcom's going to have to do a lot of work on showing how VCF is easier to use and scalability and total cost of ownership, and
Yeah.
you're going to lose customers.
Yeah, that's going to be a big lift. It's going to be fun to watch, though. It's always fun to watch. Anyway, again, I could talk for hours on that, and I think I just did. But let's move on because Will went from it's still kind of a curious and interesting headline you got there.
Yeah.
HPE's Q3 earnings, a tale of two cities or two portfolios.
You read my mind perfectly. As I received the news on HP's 3Q earnings, it made me think of Tale of Two Cities, and I think that was required reading for me in high school or something.
Yeah. Charles Dickens.
But it truly was. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, right? Like, I can't believe that I just pulled that off the hard drive. But the two cities involved here are my love of networking, Matt, and your love of compute. And, to no surprise, so let me start at a high level. So overall, top line revenue growth was solid, double digit, 10% year over year. And as you dig into it, a lot of that was no surprise based on server, on compute and AI, right? So that ring in, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but I know you'll have some insights here. But 4.3 billion, which was up 35%. Now, Intelligent Edge, which includes my love of networking, down about a little over $1 billion and 23% from the year prior. But what's interesting is that they kind of look at AI systems, and that's been the big growth for them in this quarter. Yep. I know. Did you check out the stock when earnings were announced? Like, I didn't see a precipitous bubble bear effect on HPE, but it is interesting. Now, I do believe, and I shared some insights over X after the earnings were announced. I do believe that long term that the company can make up some ground in networking. The close of Juniper Networks is imminent, and that's going to give HPE some wind in its sails from a networking perspective. We've talked about this before. There's going to need to be some portfolio rationalization that goes along there. But what I really like about Antonio Neri is that he's really one of the only executives that's really speaking to the importance of networking. Now, obviously, networking is important. It's the plumbing that's going to make all of this next generation AI stuff a reality. But and I think I mentioned this on a prior podcast when we were all at Discover. He really spent some time on networking and focused on the importance of it and focused on what Juniper is going to do to provide additional engineering resources and that sort of thing. So that's my take on it. But what was your take, Matt? Because I know that you were following it pretty closely too.
Yeah, AI fueled. You hit it. 35% growth in server, largely attributed to their AI systems. outside of that, and you were asking about their stock, it was pretty flat. It stayed pretty flat. Growth overall was strong. Cloud was pretty strong. Hybrid cloud was down, but they have a weird mix. I'm going to get into some more detail, but it feels like storage. I suspect storage dragged down their hybrid cloud business, which is something every OEM's been experiencing, save Lenovo. But I feel like, again, I mentioned this a few minutes ago. I feel like AI is what's been carrying the load or the burden for a lot of these companies. The AI business is been very healthy, and overall, it's been flat to down. And the problem with AI is those configurations that are going out are super rich and they're super low margin for the OEMs. So while the revenues look, as you mentioned, top line, and by the way, HPE beat on revenue, EPS, and guidance. So they beat on all of them. But their margins, margins have been down across the board for a lot of these companies because of, they're just not making a lot of money on those systems that are going out.
We talked about Dell, right? A few weeks ago, or a month ago or something. I mean, nice growth in their compute business, right? But margin, super low margin, right?
Yep. Yeah. Paul, what do you think?
Well, gross margins were down year over year. So, the revenue may be growing, but there's some pressure on profitability.
Yeah. I think there's I'm going to hit on this on my topic, but I think another one of the companies that reported this week talked about non-AI business, but I'll save that for my thunder. But yeah, interesting. And they mentioned Juniper, and they closed on Morpheus, which I thought was a great acquisition as well. So there's there are a lot of good signs out of what they're doing, right? But yeah, anyway, let's move on for the sake of time, and move on to the world's most powerful AI training system, led by the very, very capable and smart Paul Smith-Goodson.
Yeah, Elon Musk is pushing it pretty heavily. He's the xAI team built Colossus, which is 100,000 H100s for training online. They did it like in 100 plus days, 122 days, something like that. And it's it's a groundbreaking system. It's right now, it's the most powerful AI training cluster ever built, and they've got plans to expand it to 200,000 with 50,000 H200s. And so that's going to be in the next couple of months. Of course, Zuckerberg he's been ramping up his AI. He's got a goal of building one with 350,000 H100s in it, and he's supposed to do that by the end of 24. So, this is an elephant race going at horse speed. It's amazing what they're doing with all these GPUs and everything, the amount of money that they're spending. xAI also brought out, they had Grok chatbot that they launched last year, and they just launched Grok 2, and it's amazing. You go on X and pull up the beta Grok 2. I don't know if you've seen on the internet all these images of politicians and stuff in social media, like Trump dressed in a gown and
creepy. I saw that just the other day, Paul.
There's no restrictions on the politicians right now. Most of them are you can't do that. But I think that's where these are coming from. So
interesting.
So it's a horse race. The interesting thing about Colossus is that I don't know if you guys remember or not, but there's an old science fiction movie called Colossus, the Foreman Project, and the U.S. built this giant supercomputer to manage the nuclear arsenal, and it became self-aware, and it started thinking that it needed to take care of the humans, and it was going to basically govern the world. And then it made a discovery that the Russians also had a computer like that. So these two computers ended up taking over the world in this. So I'm sure that's where he got the name Colossus. So,
interesting. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me of War Games, right? Like I'm a big sci-fi fan, but I'm not familiar with that movie. Was it like done in the 60s or 70s or something?
Yeah. It was way back. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look that one up. That's interesting.
Yeah.
The scariest thing in all of that to me is that we just referenced the 70s as way back when.
I know, man. Like I'm so freaking old. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm so sad.
You know, it's funny. I'm going to go off topic for a moment. Like, so I went to the first University of Texas home game, and I got dressed and I got out the door, and I was driving to Austin, and I realized that I had turned into my father. At 57, I was wearing Longhorn burnt orange tennis shoes, burnt orange shorts, a white shirt, and a burnt orange hat. And I'm officially old.
Yeah. I was with one of my brothers over the weekend, and I was like, man, he's turned into dad. And my wife was like, you've turned into dad. I was like, okay, thanks. That's not a bad thing. Anyway,
not a bad thing.
Hey, let's move on to the last topic before we hit the fun stuff, and that is kind of almost a continuation, Will, of and Paul, of the conversation we were just having around quarterly numbers. So I wanted to dive in on this a little bit more. Will, you started out on it. HPE was up big with 35% growth year over year in server. Dell was up big as well overall, and they were up 38%, I think, year over year. Lenovo was up really big. I forget their exact number, but they were up big. Everybody reported really large increases in revenue. At the same time, everybody was reporting lower than desired margins, right? Everybody's margins were down a little bit. Operating income was down and margins were down a little bit. Mm-hmm. Or operating income wasn't down. It was due to layoffs and headcount reductions, right? So, and if you looked further and you looked at the portfolio, both Dell and HPE were down in their storage business. Dell explicitly called out, I think they were down 5% year over year on storage, and HPE lumps storage in with hybrid cloud, which also includes backup and recovery, resilience. Zerto is built into that. Those are all growth areas. So it's clear that their electro storage business, to me, I strongly suspect their electro storage business was down as well. So what's going on, right? I want to touch on this. And by the way, Broadcom announced just the other day, or announced yesterday or the day before, and their software business was up. Their silicon business was up, but their silicon business was up driven by AI acceleration. Their non-AI business, Hock Tan said, had bottomed out, and he expected it to come back. So what's going on? I think, as we talked about earlier, I think AI is driving the day. And along with that, why is that impacting storage? I think organizations that are looking at AI projects are looking at very specific solutions. Mm-hmm. They're not, we're going to buy all Dell, we're going to buy all HPE, we're going to buy all Lenovo or Supermicro. They're buying best performance, kind of best of breed kind of solutions, which is why, companies like Vast Data, Weka, DDN have taken off. It's why Pure Storage was up 10% this quarter, year over year, while everybody else's storage was down. It's why NetApp has been performing stronger. So I think what you're seeing on the storage front or what you're seeing overall is an AI-driven market, and compute. You have a few obvious choices that have done very well with low margins, but then on the storage front, you've seen IT customers go kind of off the off the price sheet, if you will, from the traditional OEMs and look at these more performant storage solutions. And so that's what I think is kind of driving all of that. Like I said, Hock Tan had mentioned that his silicon business, semiconductor business, that was not AI related, had bottomed out. He was expecting a rebound. So I think we'll see it kind of come back over time. You were talking about, what's this look like, Will?
Yeah.
I think over time we'll see it come back in the next quarter or two. But frankly, that's as I look at everything kind of in total, if you will, that's all I can come up with is AI is kind of, quite frankly, it's been the savior of the tech market to some degree for hardware because it's driven up otherwise lackluster performance.
Yeah, it's really served, sort of as the water, right? I may have mentioned this. So Ed Ellett, someone I worked for many years ago at Compaq, he's now back at Dell. And when we connected at Dell Tech World, he said, hey, I like an AI to like, water, and the industry, the tech industry was parched, and this is the water that it needs. And my thoughts, Matt, align to yours. It's a prioritization on compute because there's scarcity out there. I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but like NVIDIA is like they've pre-sold all the stuff they've got in the barn, and they've even pre-sold Blackwell, right? So I think people are scrambling to get the compute shored up, and in the interim, they're going to let kind of networking, and we saw this with HPE's earnings. They're going to let kind of networking. They're going to kind of park it and do the same with storage. But you need all of these components to come together to deliver, right? A robust, type of solution. We've seen the same thing in the mobile network industry where we had this whole notion of go update the radio access network first, in a non-standalone fashion with 5G new radio, follow that with core infrastructure to get to standalone. Well, lo and behold, the RAN market freaking died this year because all of the MNOs around the world had already gotten their RAN infrastructure updated, right? Yeah. And now they're focused on core. So it's very cyclical. And so, folks like ourselves, we have insight into this because we follow it, we live it, we breathe it every day. But many of our, viewers don't have that luxury. I don't know if I call it a luxury. It may be a curse. But.
Curse.
Well, Dell has got almost a $4 billion backlog in AI servers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to manage that backlog some way because if you want to keep up with growth, and customers can get discouraged, and so it can have a lot of ramifications. Yeah,
you're right, Paul. And HPE is in a similar position. I think they did like 1.3 billion in AI server sales this quarter, and they have a backlog of upwards of 3 billion. So it's a similar dynamic. It's not a bad problem to have. And I think I actually like what HPE is doing around its private AI cloud. They all have an AI factory. I love how they're bundling services and additive kind of solutions on top of this to make up for that lack of margin on the hardware.
Yeah,
it's smart, and it's what you have to do.
Juniper Networks has been doing the same thing with AI blueprinting, and I think I've spoke to that on a prior podcast, but it's innovative, it's reducing the friction, it's accelerating adoption, and it's an additional margin opportunity for these companies. So it's brilliant. It's a win-win for customers, and it's a win for the OEM.
Yep. Yeah. Anyway, we could go on forever. Sorry. I know we're going to be coming up on time, so let's get to our final section. Getting to know you, We're going to have to do a lead-in song for this. I don't like getting to know the team. You guys had some really good suggestions last time, and I forgot them. So,
thanks.
Getting to know the team. So here's the question of today. I asked Paul beforehand, and he didn't like it, but I don't care because I heard you reference something earlier a couple of times, Will, which told me that it was fate. We needed to bring this up.
Okay.
Here's the question. I'll go first, so you guys have a chance to kind of think this one through.
By the way, for our viewers, I haven't been pre-wired on this one, so
nope.
And Paul hasn't
either because Paul crapped all over it and said no, and it left his brain. So he hasn't either. But this is a segment where we kind of tell a little bit about ourselves so you can get to know us as people instead of just incredibly intelligent analysts. So here's this week's question. Rest of your life, you can only read 3 books. What are they? Yeah. So you get to go back in time, Paul. You said you hadn't read in a while because life gets in the way. But that's the question. Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to start so you guys have some time to think this through. My 3, the first is East of Eden from Steinbeck. And I choose that because the way he writes is just so clean and simple, yet so impactful. Quite frankly, anything from Steinbeck would be number 1. Number 2 is The World According to Garp by John Irving. Another very clean but really creative way of writing, and I love the story. And the third is Ham on Rye from Charles Bukowski, who was a raging alcoholic and probably the best writer ever. And you can read his stuff 20 times and you get 20 different kind of angles and you laugh at 20 different things. So those are my 3. Who wants to go next?
I'm gonna let Paul go because I'm thinking about.
I'll go. I mean, I have to throw the Bible in there as number 1.
Fair enough.
It would be Strangers by Dane Kuntz and Catcher in the Rye.
Ooh, Salinger. Very good. Very good. By the way, thanks for making me feel like a complete heathen by throwing the Bible out, Paul. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I was trying to make it.
All right, well, you're up, man.
All right, man. Okay, you put me on the spot. What I've discovered, the 8 or so years that I've been doing this fantastic analyst gig is that I don't spend enough time reading for pleasure because we do so much research in the course of what we do and writing. But with that said, and my love of the Florida Keys and my very modest second home in Isla Mirada, Ernest Hemingway would be an author that I would go back to as I, channel my creative writing skills with maybe a little less alcohol than Mr. Hemingway. But The Old Man and the Sea, what a classic, story. I just love how descriptive he is in his writing, and and I just sort of feel like when I'm down there in Florida, that I'm kind of channeling that. If you haven't been to the Hemingway house in Key West, highly recommend it.
Yeah.
I learn something new every time I go there. The polydactyl cats. He got a cat. It was for luck, six-toed cat, and they proliferated, and there are hundreds of 6-toed cats running around that place now. So that would be one author and one book. 2 others. I would be. Man, I tell you what, I'm so shallow.
That's all right. You don't have to get if he steals it for you, that's fine.
I think he does, and I've read some great, I'm more of a kind of a fiction, guy. I've talked about my love of science fiction. So there's some great, when I was a kid, there were some great novels that were spun off Star Wars. And, I think the viewers can see the lightsabers behind me and all the Star Wars stuff that I have. But I enjoyed reading those as a kid. So I might go back to one of those. And I tell you, another fascinating book that I did read a few years ago was the Bad Blood, that was based on Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos and that whole clown show. That was a very, very interesting read. I don't know if that would be, my third and final, but hey, I came up with 2 other books, man.
We'll take it.
Yeah.
I love it. It's getting to know us.
That's right.
Getting to know all about us. And next week,
sometimes you're surprised by personal taste.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, and next week or the next one, we're really going to surprise people because we're going to try and recreate one of the songs from the Sound of Music. So I'm not going to say which one. You guys just drink your tea with honey before the podcast.
Oh, nice.
All right. Hey, listen, guys, this was a great conversation. Thank you to all 24,000 folks that have tuned in to watch and listen to us. around the globe. Like I said earlier, don't take anything we say as investment advice. This is really just our opinions on what's going on in the market. If you like us, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. If you don't like us, get on Twitter, and I want you to talk really poorly about Paul Smith-Goodson.
Yeah, and Patrick Moorhead.
And Patrick Moorhead, because he abandoned us. But guys, thank you for a really great time. I know we're all going to be on the road quite a bit over the next couple of months. We'll have fun in London. I'm going to be in Vegas, and we'll connect again in a couple of weeks.
Awesome.
Good.
Thanks,
See you guys.
Yeah.
Happy weekend.
Happy weekend.